welcome. You're listening to The Voice TV, and today we turn our attention to growing concerns within the media and civil society over the government's proposed national press accreditation policy and the new broadcasting and online content regulations. Critics argue that these measures could significantly impact press freedom, expand state control over journalism, and place new restrictions on both media professionals and online content creators. To help us unpack the legal, constitutional, and democratic implications of these proposals, I am joined by a lawyer and political activist, Hassan Martin. Mr. Martin, you're welcome, and it's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Madam Kurwari. Your pleasure.
Okay, Mr. Martin, before going deep into the program, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, I am lawyer Hassan Martin, a human rights activist and also a political advocate, mostly also into a lot of legal practice in the Gambia, and also have been working in various institutions, also involved in a lot of shaping the Gambian political narrative. Beyond that, I'm also into a lot of educating, helping the conscious mass in my country.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin, for that introduction. So, going to the conversation, from the constitutional perspective, do you consider the proposed national press accreditation card like lawful?
Well, it's not because this is just a proposal. A proposal is that government is trying to bring something which the stakeholders, which is the media fraternity, have to look into. I remember we have different institutions within the Gambian media, but which is the most central one is the Gambia Press Union, and this is where all media, are affiliated bodies, and also you have the media structures that are in the country. However, as you just mentioned, it's a proposal from government, and I think the proposal is trying to regulate, as far as what you've introduced, that they're trying to regulate the activities of the media to the point that they're trying to regulate the activities of the, online media or what is going into our, TVs or radios or whatever we want to cover. The most important thing I want to say here before we go in is that the media issue is like an institutional governance, in the sense that we have 4 branches, in fact, now in terms of governance. They always say that the executive exists, the judiciary, and the legislature, but the final pillar being the media. Media there means that it's the 4th estate, that is how we call it. And mostly their job also involves holding government accountability and then disseminating information into the public space. So in that sense, therefore, definitely we should allow the media to do their jobs effectively. However, I don't know if we are going into the details of this proposal, which is the accreditation proposal, which is a policy to regulate the activities of every journalist. I think it is something that we definitely don't agree to, or if not, I think they're going to look into it and review it. Because anything that goes against the work of the media, we are totally against it.
Okay. So going into the press freedom that you've been fighting for, how is it going to affect press freedom and investigative journalism in the Gambia?
Well, definitely we don't compromise when it comes to freedom of press, freedom of expression, thought, or consent. It's stated in our constitution. It's a constitutional pillar. Also, the freedom, to access information. As you recently know, there's a Distinct Information Act, that was the bill that was passed in Parliament. So basically, journalists should be allowed to do their job. They should hold government to account. No, it's fundamental that nothing should go against that constitutional mandate, that constitutional provision which allows freedom of expression, thought for all journalists. Section 25 also covered that also. So in that sense, what we want to say here is that government should allow free flow of information, smooth working relation. You should have smooth working relationship with the media. And then also what I want to mention here is that no censorship should play within the media. This is very important because the information that people need, government has to be transparent, and then the media has to disseminate. They have to report do their reporting. They have to put information into the public space with no interference, without fear, and without no restriction. Basically, this accreditation policy, which was forwarded, is trying to regulate the media, and the regulations is definitely not, appropriate in this case.
So, can you talk about the implication that it can have?
Well, the implication that it can have is that it's going to try to control the media and discourage people from coming into the media, because definitely we have a lot of young people today, especially when you look at not only the online and the written, print media, but a lot of people are doing good jobs today, covering a lot of events for the people to bring awareness within the public space. Dissemination of information should be all over. You understand? So, but if you tell today that journalists cannot go and do their work in the streets, or they cannot go, even if they are going to do an event, they have to pay, if I'm understanding this proposal, that is totally out of order. And I think the journalists, my appeal is that the press freedom, the GPU, they should hold their guard, let them stand against it, and put pressure back to the government to make sure that this thing is reviewed. I don't know whether the government, in fact, they should have need to send back this proposal.
Okay, so going into talking about this independent body like the Media Council, what role should Media Council play in this kind of things? Because I think they should be the first people to talk about this, to give accreditation to media personnel. But going into the government, leaving it to the government to bring this kind of thing, what role should they play as an independent body?
Well, the Media Council, I consider them like a media watchdog. I mean, it should be effective. I'm hearing most of the time, I hardly do I hear about Media Council. A media watchdog, and also it should, a media council that you mentioned, it should definitely have an experienced media personalities who should sit there, helping to regulate and to help reform the media systems, the media style of media, because media is dynamic. The work of media is dynamic. It goes with times. So if you have such bodies called a media council, they should be effective, they should be efficient, but their role should be trying to help reform, try to help rock the structure and bring working relationship, because remember, the GPU holds the central body when it comes to the media. All journalists are affiliated, all media practitioners are affiliated with the GPU. That's the union to decide the welfare of the media. However, these media council, definitely, as I say, in the Gambia, most of these institutions are failing. They cannot perform, to standard. I mean, they are just there as a symbol. So I think it's the press union who should even come out, you understand, to make sure that they put pressure and make sure there is a reform of this media council. They have to explain their role. They have to explain the way they function. I mean, to make sure that, it's part of an institution. I don't know whether there are people sitting there receiving money, but what are they doing? Are they working hand in gloves with the, GPU? Much more looking at this should not have, it didn't come from media council. The best body that should have look at this kind of proposal and even come with this kind of proposal, not proposal to restrict or stifle the media. I totally disagree for any institution to try to stifle or try to restrict media work. But media council should come in a form of a reform. They should build a reform agenda, not coming from an executive perspective where ministry or government, as I mentioned, I think they mentioned PURA, which is a regulatory body dealing with utilities and so on, trying to control this kind of agenda.
Okay, so moving into the international level, could this thing spoil the Gambia in the international level, like press freedom and the
Yes, of course. I mean, this have an effect because the image of Gambia, because definitely most constitutions, especially the democratic countries, they look to have the media functioning very well. Media having expressions, function has to be there. As I say, the fundamental, the thing that underpins democracy is one important thing that underpins any successful democracy is media freedom, where information coming into the public space, information being disseminated to the public, and the government accountability. Remember, media is important. I mentioned here, it's the fourth estate. Their work should be effective. Their work should be smooth. They should be allowed to make sure they put pressure so that our governance should grow. But now, if you have a regulation that is very counter-effective, because this regulation is not helping, you are trying to stifle the media. It's a total, riding rock saw. It's like you are trying to put a nail into the work of a media. How can a media, how they call it, the person in the sense that independent journalism or media houses that goes out, to get information out of the public space, social issues, and now you're telling them that they have to pay for doing that kind of a job, or they have to go and get license just to go and question people. I mean, this thing, we can understand, as I say, a proposal can be looked at. In fact, the press union should take the opportunity and make a counter proposal. Let the press union sit down. If they want to regulate, it has to come within. This is my point. Regulation for the media has to come within. In most democracies, that's how it works. Today, if we have a change of government, our recommendation will not be not government dictating. This is what we have in this proposal. Government is dictating that they're going to make sure that every single detail of the media must come to them. They are the one to give you approval. They are the one to give you license. It doesn't work like that. The most fundamental body that you mentioned is the Media Council that should have taken charge. Their job is to look over, it's an oversight body also within the media fraternity. Then they can come up, if they want to say, okay, we want to do something better here for our media. The Media Council should be the body that should come with a paper. You see, like what they say, they can outline a blueprint to say, okay, how can we help empower young people into the journalism? But this kind of proposal, you are discouraging. You are sending people away from the media fraternity. I mean, it's definitely, they should condemn it. But I agree totally also, if at all the GPU can go back into the drawing board, make a counter proposal, or look, as I mentioned, Media Council take it upon themselves, come up with a better paper, but not something that has to stifle or have to restrict the work of the media. Because remember, there are a lot of corruption issues, a lot of social, anti-social issues that go out there in the public. And some of this information, we can only get them into the media. We already have some acts or some laws have already been passed when it comes to the social media. We are, you know what I mean? We can understand those ones. Insults or bad vices in the social media, that's already our control. But the work of a journalism who may be a professional, to come to the point that it's like you have to be paying and some fees just to do some small work. And when you look at it technically, it's like every program that you even run in the social media or in the in the public space, you have to pay for that. Then what kind of democracy we are?
So this takes me to my last question. So what message will you have to tell journalists, civil society, and the general public Gambian about these proposed policies?
Well, let them stand their ground. It's a proposal. Proposal is nothing. It's not to be implemented. They know the relevant laws around the media, the freedom of expression, the provisions and everything. Let them take it in house and see if they can have a counter proposal. But anything that goes, the journalism, the media fraternity, definitely they should take their stance, and they can come up for me, anything that restricts or that try to regulate in terms of censorship, I know that they should explain themselves so that these people understand them very well. But this is a proposal, and then they can look at it, a counter proposal, or definitely they say that, well, let them take a stance and that they're not going to comply with that. So those are the options available to them.
Okay, thank you for having you. Thanks for your time.